don't get so emotionally connected that when the numbers aren't there, that you hang on to it because you're the one that, that did the tile work, and you're the one that did all of that handy work on it, and so now you get emotional about the building. So you have to be careful not to do that. And so I like to just look at, I hate reports. If you ever worked for corporate America and you had to do reports, you're like, oh, what are these for? Well, where reports come in is when you can look at those numbers and not see which building you're looking at. Just look at the raw numbers. How is it performing? And so what we did a couple of times is we said, we want to get some cash. Let's sell what is performing the worst. Because remember, real estate is all about good, better, and best. So let's get the one that's performing the least for us or the worst for us. Let's sell that one and try to move that money into something better now that we have a little bit of experience under our belt. And of course it was the one that was performing the worst was the one that I did all by myself, and I was so proud I did it without him, and I was like, I did the whole thing all by myself. So again, I was emotionally attached to that one because it was like, that was the one I did all by myself. And of course because of the size of the building, we just couldn't get a big enough staff in there, enough people in there to really cash flow that one and to get enough equity that we could leverage that one. And so the best way to leverage that one was to simply sell that one and then use those funds to buy something else. So that was the way we leveraged that one, was by selling it. So anyway, don't get emotionally connected. But once you start doing the fixes, you either have to decide that you're going to do the fix yourself as much as you can, or you're going to pay somebody to do it, and all of that has to be built in to the numbers at the front end. You have to decide at the front end, if I buy this, how am I going to turn this into what I need to turn it into? And we were just having a conversation, Bob and I was just having the conversation before we got started today. If you're flipping, you've got a short amount of time. You might be using hard money to fund it or private money to fund it. And if you're flipping it, you want to get the highest price. So you need to get in fast because you've got this high interest rate loan, either hard money or private money. And you've got, as you're getting it ready to go back on the market, you want it to go at the highest price possible when you sell it. That's the whole point of flipping, is to get in, use somebody else's money, sell it, get that money paid off, get some cash in your pocket, and go do another one. And so you're touching all the surfaces. You're touching all the surfaces in there when you're going to flip something. But if you're going to hold it, you don't have to touch all those surfaces. If you're going to hold it as a rental, you have to ask yourself, where is this house located? What type of a renter am I going to get? What type of community is this? What type of neighborhood is this? And what are they expecting? If it's not in Muirfield, they're not expecting granite countertops oftentimes. So you don't have to feel that you need to put granite countertops in every single rental. And here's my lesson for buy and holds. If everybody is in the market to start doing buy and holds, which is my favorite thing to do because that's where the passive income comes in, is you have you've got the lower class folks, then you've got the middle class, and then you've got the upper class. So the lower class, if anybody has ever researched this, the lower class all has a particular mindset. They're very open, they share with each other because they know every 30 days they're going to get another check. And so if somebody's in trouble, here, take some of mine, I'll help you out. And it's a really a nice community. They really look out for each other, but they will always kind of be stuck there. And again, I'm being very stereotypical here. They're just going to kind of be stuck in that community, that environment. And it works for them. Then you've got the middle class, and the middle class is split into two. You've got the lower middle class that every time they get a raise, they run out and buy something. They get a raise, they go buy a new boat. They get a raise, Mark says, yeah, he buys a new airplane. They get a raise, they buy the summer house. They get a raise, they're buying new furniture. They're always buying something, and so they never invest. Now they live very nicely. They have very nice houses. They've got you know, the 2 cars, the boats. They've got all the toys, okay? Because that's how they think. And then you've got the middle class that every time they get a raise, they invest it. They put it into a summer house, but then they rent the summer house out when they're not using it. And so they're always investing. And so what happens is that middle class starts to separate a little bit, because the ones that are investing keep moving up financially. The ones that are buying all their toys are depreciating. And so they're not moving up. They're kind of stuck right there. So I'm here to tell you, that's your market right there. That is who your renters are going to be. They want to live in a nice house. They want to have a nice car. They want to have the boat at the lake. They want to have the great vacations, but they never quite get ahead enough to buy a house. But they're willing to pay you to live in a really nice house. So that's the market that you're rehabbing to. Okay, so then you have to ask yourself, if that's the market that I'm rehabbing to, what do they want in a rental? So now it goes back to, what type of rental do you have? Well, I have some 1-bedroom. I have a 4-plex that has the front apartment has 2 bedrooms. The other 3 are only 1 bedroom. So I'm at that stage of looking for who's going to rent this, and it's usually a single person that wants to rent, and they've not reached that stage in their income where they're able to invest and start moving up. And so they could live in that 1-bedroom unit, and I have all single guys at the moment. One of my criteria is, if I rent to a guy, I want all of those units to be guys. If I rent to a girl, I want them all to be girls. Because if you put guys and girls in a 4-plex like that, then there's usually some romantic interest somewhere, and then they have a fight, and then and then they're, you know, scratching each other's cars or whatever. And so I just stay away from all that. And but anyway, right now I have all single guys in those units, and they've been with me for years. And I never hear anything out of them. And by the way, I'll say it, I'm a girl. The guys are always easier than the girls. She's saying yes. The guys are easier than the girls. So I have all single guys back there, never hear a peep out of any of them. I mean, unless they have a drippy faucet and they call me to say they've got a leak, I never hear anything out of them. And they just pay their rent every month, and they're happy, and they all have really nice cars parked in the parking lot. And I think 2 of the 3 are even IT guys. So they're making really good salaries. They just love living there, and they have no desire to buy a house. They don't want to mow grass. They don't want to worry about all that. They just want to come home and go to the coffee shop with their friends, or go to the microbrewery with their friends. They don't want to mow grass. So anyway, you have to know who your audience is on what type of building you have. So that's the level that you're going to rehab the rentals. And what I found, and I'm going to overgeneralize, but what I found is that most people that are renting, they just want it to be nice and clean and quiet and everything working, everything fixed, and no drama. And if you can provide a place like that, they'll stay with you for years. It does not have to have all the newest laminate, all the newest granite. It doesn't have to have all that. But again, if you're going to flip, now you want to get the highest price on the market. That's where you start putting in some of that higher end stuff. Does all of this make sense to everybody? Okay. So then you have to decide, once you find it, once you fund it, once you fix it, now you have to decide, am I going to flip it or am I going to fill it? And then if you decide you're going to fill it and you're going to be a landlord, that's another whole lesson, and we're going to get to that in another meetup because that's another whole lesson on how to fill the property and be the landlord. And I've got some great tips and tricks and pointers to give you if you're going to be a landlord. And I'll give you just a couple of them today. One of my biggest ones is, if you're going to be a landlord, create an advisory board. And you are always the good cop, and your advisory board is always the bad cop. So no matter what your tenant says to you, your answer is yes. Yes, that's perfect. Well, let me check with my advisory board. Can I pay my rent late? Yes. But let me check with my advisory board and make sure, it's not too late. Can I park my car in the grass? Oh, I think that'd be a wonderful idea, but let me check with my advisory board.
That's a wonderful lady.
So I'm always the good cop, and my advisory board is always the bad cop.
And that's you guys, by the way.
Yeah, so we are your advisory board. So the point is your tenants will look you up online. So I recommend that if you're going to be a landlord, to actually create a website for yourself. And you cannot be a property manager legally in Ohio unless you're working for a realtor or you are a realtor working for a broker. But you can have properties, and so you can, like, I'm just Kathy Benner Companies is the name of my company. It's just Kathy Benner Companies. And I can manage all of my own property, but I can't call myself a property management company. So, well, you guys, you've named your company just the word properties.
Yeah, Llama Property.
Yeah.
So, Llama came from our daughters. It's Laura and Mary. And then properties. So.
Yeah. And so I recommend that you have a website, and then on your website, put your advisory board there and automate as much as you can. And again, that's another whole conversation for another whole time when we talk about being a landlord. So I want to talk a little bit, I know Mark's eating his sandwich there, but I want to talk a little bit about in the fixing, the hardest fix that we probably have done. Well, Mark might have a different version of what was the hard, because he does the hard stuff, the actual, hands-on hard stuff on some of these properties. Which one would you say was the hardest? Was it 57 or was it Groveport or something else?
57 because of the deadline, and
Okay.
because we didn't know what we were doing yet.
Okay, so that was the one I just described to you. That one, that's the one I would have said was our hardest one as well, was our first one. And it got easier after that, because after you go through zoning a few times, you learn the ropes. You know what questions to ask. When you first start, you don't know what you don't know. So you're not even sure what questions to ask. And so once you're in that and you know what questions to ask, it goes a whole lot smoother. And so then we did a salon in Groveport. It went pretty well. I did the one all by myself over in Pickerington. That one went well. We did one in German Village of all places. That one went well. We did one in Lancaster. I went down to the zoning office and I said, I want to have a salon in this building. And they were like, why are you here? And I'm like, well, what do I need to do? And they're like, just put your sign out and advertise. I'm like, okay.
That's type of zoning.
So anyway, everything's different. And we just recently bought a house down on the Ohio River, and it was the same thing. We wanted to paint the brick. And so I went into the zoning office to the building inspector, and because I had called and I said, what do I need to do? We bought a house, we're going to be rehabbing it. And he said, oh, just come see me. I said, okay. So we drove down there, and Mark started working, and I went over to the zoning office to see this guy. And I said, well, I'm here. I said, do I need a permit? I said, we're getting ready to paint. And he goes, who told you that? I said, you did? You said when I got down here to come in and see you. And he goes, no. He goes, I don't need to see you. He said, I don't care. He said, you can paint it purple for all I care. He goes, I don't care what color you paint it. And I said, well, now we want to put new windows in. He goes, I don't care what windows you put in. He goes, I don't care what roof you put on it. He said, the only time you need to come and see me is if you're going to change the actual footprint of the house. He said, that's the only time you need to see me. The rest of the time, he said, I don't care what you do.
Basically, if you're going to dig, what would be a fence or a foundation that you need to see?
Yeah, he just wanted to make sure we didn't hit a gas line or put something too close to the neighbor's property line. He said, other than that, he goes, I don't care what you do. So zoning is different everywhere you go. And so once you've been through that a time or two, it gets easier, because you at least know what questions to ask. And you know your way around, and you know why they're doing things. And at the end of the day, when it comes to permits, they're just protecting their liability. But by protecting their liability, it protects your liability. Because if somebody would get hurt, say at that salon property, the city's going to say, hey, if we're not at fault, we made sure that she did everything correctly and we inspected it all and it all passed. So we're not at fault here. And then I can say, I did everything the city asked me and it all passed. See, so it protects their liability and it protects my liability. And so then when you go to insure those buildings, the insurance company wants to say, was the stuff, was there permits and were there inspections? And if I say yes, there were permits and inspections on every stage, every step of the way, then the insurance company is going, you're fine. You'll get the best insurance rate because it protects their liability. So you see, it's all about protecting liability. So don't be upset that you have to permit something or have something inspected, because at the end of the day, it's in your favor to have that done. Does that make sense? So a lot of people are like, oh, let's try to hide and not get a permit to do this. Well, if something goes wrong and they can show that it wasn't permitted or inspected, then guess the liability is going to end with the person that did the work or the owner of the property. Okay, so that's why you don't run from that. But a lot of times, just like this one down at the Ohio River, where I'm thinking we have to have it permitted to have inspections, and he was like, I don't care what you do, just as long as you don't dig. Once we learned that, and we go to other different cities and we check with zoning, a lot of them say if it's your own property, you don't have to oftentimes get it permitted and inspected if it's your own. If you're doing it as a business, if you're the contractor, then they want you to have the inspections. But a lot of times if you're working on your own house, they don't require you to do that. But again, every little community is different, so you have to check in each individual little community. And then we were just having the conversation about short-term rentals. A lot of cities are creating ordinances within their city limits on what you can and cannot do for short-term rentals. So, and we have another whole group that gets together once a month for short-term. So if anybody is into that, you can contact me and I can hook you up with that other group. So, questions. Who has actually, I know you've done some rehabs. Do you do any of the work physically yourself?
Almost nothing.
Almost nothing.
Yeah.
I know David's done a lot.
So, and we do both.
Yeah.
Right now we're house hacking, and so I'm doing a live-in rehab on the house that we're currently occupying with the intent of eventually renting it out and moving on to our next thing. And right about this time last year, we bought another house down in Lancaster that needed some major rehab, and I farmed 90% of that out.
Yeah.
So,
and we're doing both these days as well. We still do some of our own, and we still farm a lot of it out these days. So, give me an example. What was your worst rehab experience? Which one was the toughest, hardest one for you?
Well, that's a really great question. So, I probably can relate to Mark a lot in that I like having full control of things. So definitely farming it out is hard for me because I want to be able to. I want to say I did that and I know it's done right. I don't like trusting other people who have done it the way I would have done it. So not really difficult for me physically, but difficult for me emotionally. And then I mean everything that I've done, kind of learned as I went along. So it was all hard at one point. I don't know really that I have a hardest thing for what I've done myself. But yeah, I enjoy learning. So the really hard things don't really feel hard to me because I got to learn something.
I have to agree with that. Even though opening that first salon was a really hard one for us, I felt like I had learned something there, and so again, I was ready to do it again. I was ready to go to another city and let's buy another one. Let's do this again. Now that I know what questions to ask, let's do it again. And so it is kind of exciting. Yeah, it's very exciting. So Bob, tell us, you say that you farm out most of yours. You don't do too much of the actual rehab. What was the actual hardest thing or hardest one that you were involved in? What was hard about it?
Probably the first one. I didn't know what to do. I did have somebody that was referred to me, and he functioned as the general contractor. And I think I kept really bad books in the beginning. I lost $9,000 on it, but I learned a whole lot, and I thought I just got to do this again and get better at the books.
Okay.
I didn't budget enough for the whole rehab. I underdid it, and I thought it'd take 60 days. It took more like 100, so it was
Okay.
like double.
So you learned a little more about how to put together your scope of work and how to price it out and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And oftentimes with me and Mark, oftentimes we don't even write up a scope, because it's the two of us, and we are now financing our own properties, so we don't have hard money hanging out here. We don't have private money hanging out here. We oftentimes don't even have a mortgage hanging out there at all because we've just paid cash for something. And so, because we're in the retirement stage and we like to travel quite a bit, we're like, we'll work on it when we have time. And so, so we don't even do a scope. We just roll up our sleeves and start in because our holding cost is so low that we just say, okay, we're gonna put like my condo in Florida is a perfect example. We're staying there. When I wanted to go to Florida, my girlfriend and her husband already bought a place down there, and she said, when are you going to move down here? And I said, I don't think I'm going to move, but I might look around for something maybe like a vacation property. And I found this single wide mobile home for $7,900, and I was like, what is wrong with this place? And I kept looking. It was real tiny. It was old, but they had put brand new carpet in and had freshly painted everything. Had this old original cabinets, but they'd been painted. Had new laminate countertops, but laminate. It was a mobile home. And I said to the guy, he said, yeah, my dad lived here and he's going into a nursing home, and he said he can't live on his own anymore. So he said, we just need to dump this little trailer. And I said, would you take $5,000 for it? He said, send me a check. So I sent him a check. And then I gave Mark a little card that said, you now have vacation property in Florida. and I hadn't seen it. Mark hadn't seen it. We were going on a cruise.
We have a special guest here in the house. Mr. Elliott, it's his birthday.
Okay, we're going to have a big
11
birthday
years
singing
old.
in a minute,
Happy
just so everybody
birthday,
knows. So anyhow, we were doing a cruise, and so we flew down to go do our cruise, and at the end of the cruise, we actually had to drive up to Zephyr Hills to see what I bought. We hadn't even seen it. And we threw away one chair and hung a couple of pictures, and we used it for 3 years as our little vacation place, and loved it. And so then Mark says, well, I really like Florida, but he said, we're always driving over to the coast. And he said, and it's just a long drive at night, on Route 4. If anybody knows anything about Florida, you're just out there driving for miles in the middle of the state. So I thought, well, I can't afford anything along the coast. But I kept looking because I love looking, I love the finding piece of real estate. And I finally found a 1-bedroom condo that I could tell had not been updated. It had it was only 576 square feet total, and it had 3 different floors in it and different colored paints, and everything was old, nothing had been updated, and it was $52,000. And everything else around it was like $152,000. And so I finally, after watching it for a while, I finally just called the realtor and said, hey, I'm going to take that condo. And he said, what do you want to offer? And I said, $52,000. And he goes, okay. He said, I'll just put it in contract then. He said, that's what the seller wants for it. He said, I'll have it in contract within 30 minutes. So he sent me the contract. We were in contract. We closed on that one. And again, we went down to see what I bought. But because it was $52,000 and we didn't have a lot of money invested in it, we decided to just rehab it when we felt like it. And so far, Mark has done the bathroom floor, he's done bathroom fixtures, he's done the kitchen floor, we've done new appliances in the kitchen, we did a couple of new windows, and we did some new carpet. We're on a second floor of a three-floor unit, condo association complex, and we're in the middle. And so we did decide to put carpet because we realized how noisy the neighbors are above us. And we didn't want to be noisy to the neighbors below us, so we did put carpet in ours to kind of muffle some of that noise. And but anyway, we just did it as we have the cash and as we feel like it. So we go down, we're like, do you want to go to the beach or do you want to put down a floor today? No, let's go to the beach. So we're just doing it as we have the time. And so there's no real pressure for us to try to flip that. And now, at some point, I want to rent it out to a snowbird. Once we do get it all done, I want to rent it out January, February, and March, and that 12 weeks will pay for 100% of the unit for the entire year. And so if I can just rent it for 12 weeks once a year, I have a free vacation home.
Including the car and the car insurance that we have there.
Yeah.
It's incredible what short-term renters will pay.
Yeah. So that's the plan, is to actually have it cash flow once we're ready, but there's no pressure because the holding cost is so low on that one. So does that make sense? So any questions from anyone?
Do you own these in an LLC?
Actually, I do not. And again, there's a big debate. Do you want to hold them individually? As a sole proprietor, do you want to hold them in an LLC? If you have an LLC, are you going to be a single member LLC, or are you going to have a bigger LLC with more members, which means then you're going to be filing a separate tax return for your LLC? Do you want to have an actual corporation that you're holding them in, or do you want to put them in a trust? And we've decided to put ours in a trust. So our trust actually holds all of our properties.
It varies a lot with where you are in life. That is where we need to be at this stage in our life, protecting each of us. And we're not husband and wife, and the reason for that is I'm an aircraft mechanic, and if I have a plane fall out of the sky, it really shouldn't cost her retirement. Interestingly, I did have one fall out of the sky up in Danbury, Connecticut about 6 months ago. It landed in the river next to the airport. I had put the engine on it 30 hours earlier. No fault at all was determined. The guy ran out of gas. So it had nothing to do with what I had or had not done. But you worry about that, and you don't have to do something wrong in order to get sued. So that's the separation we have. We actually have a stronger relationship than a married couple does in the state of Ohio. The worst thing that could happen to a married couple is one of them not die, one of them have a cerebral hemorrhage and live in a care facility for 15 years. It will bankrupt the other one. We have a friend who has lost not one but 2 husbands to cancer. The first one, it cost her house and she was bankrupt. She's a realtor, and her second husband passed away, 6 months ago, Kathy? It looked like the same thing was happening again, but now she's a realtor and her retirement is in properties. Thankfully, he passed quickly. The bills were not too substantial. But that's what you get into in a marriage relationship. Kathy and I each have enough to care for both of us separately. And so that we consider a much stronger relationship for a 76-year-old and a not 76-year-old. And I can't tell you her age, but she is now collecting Medicare.
He's so politically correct, isn't he?